Good day, everybody. My name is Ted Gardner. I'm one of the portfolio managers on Westwood Salient's energy infrastructure team. Today, we're going to discuss October performance as well as an update on some developments in the nuclear world. October was a difficult month in terms of performance in our space. The two broader indices, AMNA and AMEI, were down 6.4% and 6.6% respectively. Meanwhile, the MLPs held up much better, with the AMZ, which is the MLP only benchmark, down only 70 basis points. That has also been the theme year to date, as the AMZ is up 5%, while the AMNA is down slightly and the AMEI is up 1.2%. Broader energy was mixed during October, with oil services performing very well with a 9.1% gain, while the E&Ps were down 4.1% and the XLE, which is the S&P energy sector, was down 1.4%. Crude oil fell 2.2% during October, bringing its year-to-date loss to 15%, while front-month natural gas had a big lift as we move into the colder weather months, bringing its year-to-date gain to 13.5%. Overall, it was a negative month, but there was a fair amount of dispersion. In the U.S. C Corps, Solaris was up 33.2% as it announced more capacity expansions related to behind-the-meter power solutions for AI data centers, but it was the only C Corp that was actually positive during October. On the downside, we saw meaningfully negative returns from New Fortress, Venture Global, and Next Decade. These are all LNG-related stocks, but we view the magnitude of the losses in those specific names really to be due to company-specific issues. For instance, NFE is a regas provider to small locations or small locales like Puerto Rico and other areas in South America, and they've had some contracting issues. Venture Global, which IPO'd earlier this year, lost an arbitration with a major customer, and the Next Decade raised a round of financing related to an expansion that cost more than what investors expected. Within the MLP category, Sunoco led the way with a 6.2% return, and then on the downside, Westlake was down the most at 10.1%. As you may recall, Enbridge and TC Energy are both roughly 10% weights in the AMNA, and these names were up roughly 15% each during the third quarter, as we saw the US dollar weaken against the Canadian dollar, and we had a bit of a flight to safety trade. But both of those names underperformed during October and were down roughly 7% each. Year to date, we see a similar dynamic with some pretty meaningful dispersion within the C Corp category. Solaris, once again, leads the way, up over 87% year to date, while NFE is down 91.5% due to the issues I mentioned a moment ago. Venture Global is now down north of 65%, and then ONEOK down almost 31% due to weakness in the natural gas liquids markets. MLPs have been the bright spot year to date. As I mentioned earlier, we have the AMZ that is leading the way year to date. And on average, the MLPs are up 8.9%, led by Genesis, which is up almost 70%, Delek up over 14%, and then MPLX with a 12.2% return. On the downside, we only have two names that are negative in that group, and that's Westlake down 13.4% and Energy Transfer down 9.3%. Canadians have also performed fairly well year to date with a 6.5% average return, led by South Bow, which was the liquids pipeline business that was spun off from TC Energy right at a year ago, up 13.4% for the year, followed by Enbridge up 12.1% and TRP up 9%. And there's only one Canadian that's been down for the year, and that's Keyera, down 2.2%. Turning now to nuclear. Nuclear has become an increasingly popular topic among investors. In fact, I think we've had meaningful discussions about nuclear in virtually every meeting and call that we've had over the last couple of months with investors. And part of that is because, along with the AI data center growth that we've actually seen some of those hyperscalers enter directly into power agreements with the nuclear facilities. I just wanted to start with what I thought was an interesting stat, is that nuclear is currently about 18.6% of power gen in the US. And I think that number is probably a bit higher than what many may have thought, given the concerns about nuclear waste and just the sheer number of plants that have been shuttered in recent decades. The president signed a number of executive orders related to nuclear during May, with one of those aimed at having 10 plants under construction by the year 2030. And at the end of October, we saw an announcement that moves towards that goal, with an $80 billion partnership between the US and Westinghouse being announced to build some new reactors in the US. We don't quite have the details on how many or what size, but industry sources believe that this could be 8 of Westinghouse's AP1000 plants, or some combination of larger and smaller reactors. Of note, each of those AP1000 reactors produce about 1.1 gigawatts of electricity. And when you do the math on that, and this is one of the concerns and knocks around nuclear, is that comes to $9.1 billion per gigawatt, which is 3 to 5 times higher price than what it would cost to build other forms of electricity. We find the structure of the deal to be interesting in that the US could have a 20% profit interest and potentially a 20% equity interest if certain targets are met. And even more interesting is that the funding is expected to come from Japan under its $550 billion infrastructure investment commitment that it made earlier during 2025. In addition to higher cost, another caveat in the nuclear space is the amount of time that it takes to bring these reactors online. Most recently, 2 new reactors were brought online at the Vogtle plant in Georgia, and those reactors took 7 years longer than expected and cost about $17 billion more than expected as well. So you've got both time and cost creep issues potentially on these nuclear builds. So while we view nuclear plants as a welcome addition to the power fleet, and one that will be necessary given the sheer amount of electricity that we'll need in the coming decades, we do not believe that they will displace natural gas as the primary source of power generation here in the US. Thank you for your time today. Please reach out to your Westrid representative with any questions.